mean, I kind of discovered Sonny Rollins right around the time when I started playing the saxophone when I was 10 years old. And I had listened to jazz before. I'd actually listened to a lot of jazz because I didn't grow up with my dad, but I had all his records, so I heard all his records. And my mom was kind of a jazz fan. I heard John Coltrane's records. She had some Howdy records. So, you know, I kind of, you know, I was familiar with jazz, but I didn't really know Sonny Rollins. And I remember I started playing saxophone, I was, like I said, around the age of 10. And I went to the public library. One of the great things about the Berkeley Public Library at the time was they had a record section where you could go and you could check out records, you know. And if you were too poor or too cheap to buy your own records, you could go and kind of explore and take a record out of the library and listen to it for a while. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm playing saxophone. You know, I've heard this guy Sonny Rollins is supposed to be pretty good, so let me go look through the Sonny Rollins bid and see what's see what's there. And the first record that I turned to was this record called. That I flipped to was this record called Saxophone Colossus. And I was like, okay, well that's a pretty bold title. Like, you know, I guess if this guy's good, this is the record to get, you know. Pretty colossal. So I remember bringing it back and putting it on the turntable. And, I can't remember the first cut. I keep forgetting the B side and the A side. The first cut, I think it's St. Thomas. Yeah, and then the first cut on the B side is Matt McRae. Yeah, but I remember putting St. Thomas on and just like listening to it. You know, I mean, it's obviously like an iconic melody, and I think I had heard the tune before. You know, it's so infectious and so catchy. But then, like when he starts improvising, like I just remember it was just like this. It was, you know, I think. Especially when you're young, sometimes, you know, a lot of, you know, it's like with musical discovery, there can be like these series of epiphanies, you know, and, you know, because you're so wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and bright and open to the world, and, you know, I remember hearing like how he, you know, he just takes like a very, very simple, I think it's like a two-note, like, melodic idea, and he just like plays that and repeats it again, and then alters it and works with it. And you know, I mean, I wasn't thinking about it in those terms, but to me, like I was listening to it, and it just sounded so. I know this sounds weird, but it sounded so easy. Like it sounded like he was just talking, like he was just speaking, you know, and like in a way that you know, we have a conversation with each other. You know, so you're not thinking about your vocabulary or your language, or you're not thinking about like nouns and verbs and adverbs. And, you know, you're just saying what's on your mind, and generally you're saying it in a way that makes some sense. You say something, and then I'm not saying I'm making a whole lot of sense right now, but you say something, and then you elaborate on it, and you might leave it. You know, go on to another idea. But there's a natural kind of like organic logic to what you're saying, you know? And for me, like hearing him improvise in that way on that song, kind of like it kind of made me realize like what that improvisation was just this. It's just conversation. It's just speaking. You know, you have to develop a vocabulary to do it, but there's a natural, like you can be completely in the moment and be completely spontaneous and unscripted, yet at the same time like be saying something that has some structure, that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that has some logic to it. So that was an epiphany for me, like hearing him improvise in that way, especially on that song and then on that record. And then also, I mean, with that record, you know, there's a lot of learning in jazz that has to. I think for most of us, in order for us to learn the jazz language, we have to kind of immerse ourselves in it. And one of the ways in which we can do that is by listening to, you know, the great practitioners of that language, the great speakers of that language, and studying them. And one of the tools, not every jazz musician, I think, I've met a few jazz musicians, brilliant jazz musicians who've never transcribed a solo in their lifetime, but they're the freaks, you know. I think they're the big outliers. I haven't transcribed a lot, but you know, I mean, less than 20 for sure. But there's a handful, and I learned almost every solo on Saxophone Colossus, and I learned almost every solo on this Dexter Gordon album called Go. So I've spent some time learning in that way, and that's a very, very specific way.
Yeah, and also, but it kind of speaks to a great point, which is maximizing what you're listening to, and you know, you don't have to transcribe everything, but you know that you can go really deep on something and get so much out of it. I mean,
absolutely.
A lifetime. And also, when I think I can speak for you when I say this, when we're talking about transcribing, you're not meaning writing it down. You're just
Actually, I think at that time, I remember when I was learning those with Nuke and with Dexter, I think I did write those down. Those are some of the early.
Okay.
No, I know. You know, I wasn't hip and wise like you, but after that, you know, I stopped. And actually, I think I found that it's better not like it's better like I transcribe. What's the word when you transcribe but don't write down?
Oh, no. Just imitate. I don't.
Transcribing.
Transcribing. There should be a word for that. Yeah. But memorize. Okay. All right. We're not. All right.
You're just getting inside that person's vocabulary, that person's conversational style. It's like kind of like getting to try on that costume and see what it feels like.
Right.
You know.
And so I remember learning some Lester Young solos a few years later, and those I never wrote down. And you know, they're super short. You know, like one course. You know, and sometimes I would only take 8 bars. I think like that what Bob's talking about, the importance of depth, not just breath. Breath, meaning like breadth. You know, like the range of. You know, this is something that I think is kind of an interesting issue now for everything in our culture, but especially for music and kind of the consumption of musical information. And I think it's particularly interesting maybe for musicians of you know, our generation we can remember a time where you couldn't listen to whatever you wanted to on YouTube, like where you couldn't access any song by anybody, you know, at the click of a mouse, you know, where you actually had to like wait for a record to come out.
Or what was available to you, you maximized. You had maybe these 3 things, these 8 things, whatever, but that's what you had, and you absorbed them.
So I think that, you know, we live in a time right now of tremendous breadth of musical information, and so and I think that's I don't bemoan that at all, or I think that's an incredible, powerful tool and an incredible resource, you know, to be able to access any musical information, you know, at any time, and I feel like the benefits of that are quite apparent, you know, when I hear like younger musicians, you know, coming up to date. It's like what they have, like the range of information that they've kind of like taken in, and you know, the range of vocabulary they have, like what they can do, especially on the obvious, like on the surface level, you know, is so much broader and so much greater than like what, you know, as an average, than like for my generation, coming up. So I think that's an incredibly powerful resource. And I think, there's nothing we can't turn back. Even if it weren't, you can't turn back time. This is how we consume culture today. But I think it's really important also the depth at which you, the depth with which you engage in any piece of music or any kind of quantity of musical information. Like I think it's great to be able to hear so much and get the kind of the surface of so many different things. But I think that there's also this kind of that there are so many layers. 8 bars of a Sonny Rollins solo, or 8 bars of a Lester Young solo, or a Stan Getz solo. There's so much depth that you can access if you're willing to maybe limit yourself a little bit, and not click that mouse, not like, okay, well, if you like this, then go check this out. I remember when I did this thing, a kind of teaching thing at the Brubeck Institute back in 2006 or something like that, and I went over to everybody was living together in this apartment, and they were like, come over, we'll listen to some music. And I came over, and they had the iTunes connected through the TV, which in 2006 was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I don't know how these kids can do that. And they started playing tunes, and I remember dude was the trumpet player, he put on this this burning Freddie Hubbard solo on the artistry of Freddie Hubbard. There's this great solo he takes in this blues, bird-like. And he started playing that, and it's one of my favorite solos, He was singing along with it, playing it. And we got he was a course and a half in, and he was like, oh man, you gotta check out this live version of Freddie playing this blues. And within 5 minutes, we had cycled through, we had not even cycled. We had gone through, we had listened to about 20 different cuts in 5 minutes, but no more than 20 seconds of each, And I was just my ears were spinning. I was like, how can you process information like this, And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm just saying for my brain can't process information like that. But even if your brain can, I think that there is something to be said for, depth and specificity and some sort of limits, limitations.